discover next. Our first entry comes from the archives of St. Vincent's Memorial Hospital. Case file NML 741, The Whistler. The date was October 17th. The time, 2:14 a.m. Registered nurse Elena Vance was midway through her double shift on the oncology ward. The floor was quiet, a state of subdued grace common to the late hours. The only sounds were the distant beep of telemetry monitors and the hum of the medication fridge. Nurse Vance was at the central station, updating a patient's chart on a computer running a Windows XP-based Metasoft system. Her coffee, black and stale from the pot brewed 6 hours prior, sat cooling beside her. The inciting incident was auditory, a faint, melodic whistling. It was a tune she didn't recognize, something old-fashioned and slightly off-key. It seemed to be coming from the north hallway, the wing containing patient rooms 210 to 220. Assuming it was a restless patient or a late-night visitor with poor judgment, Nurse Vance stood and walked down the hall to investigate. The whistling grew slightly clearer but did not increase in volume. It had a thin, reedy quality, like air forced through a narrow pipe. She reached the hallway. It was empty. The whistling, however, was now unmistakably coming from behind the door of room 213B, a private room currently unoccupied, its door closed and its light off. Her rationalization was professional. A maintenance worker, perhaps, or a new orderly unaware of protocol. She used her key card to unlock the door, pushed it open, and flicked on the light. The room was sterile, empty, and utterly still. The bed was made with tight, military corners. The whistling stopped the instant the light illuminated the space. A cold draft washed over her, though the window was sealed shut. She checked the bathroom, the closet. Nothing. She wrote it off as auditory fatigue, a trick of the ancient hospital's ventilation system, and returned to her station. The unease, however, had been planted. The slow burn lasted for the remainder of her shift. At 3:30 a.m., a patient in 215A, a Mr. Henderson, used his call button. When Nurse Vance entered, he was agitated. He asked her to please tell the man to stop whistling, that it was keeping him awake. She assured him the hall was empty. He insisted, his voice trembling, that the whistling wasn't in the hall. He said it sounded like it was coming from inside the walls. At 4:05 a.m., the whistling returned. This time, it was directly outside the nursing station. Nurse Vance looked up from her computer. The corridor was empty. The whistling seemed to hang in the air right beside her, then trailed down the south hallway towards the palliative care suites. She felt the temperature drop sharply. The reveal occurred at 4:47 a.m. The code blue alarm blared from room 213B. This was impossible. The room was empty, its call system disengaged. Yet the alarm on the board was definitive. Nurse Vance and a responding orderly, a large man named Leo, sprinted to the room. The door was locked. Through the small window in the door, they could see a figure lying in the bed, covered entirely by a white sheet. Leo used his master key. The door unlocked with a heavy clunk. As they pushed it open, the figure under the sheet sat bolt upright. The whistling began again, loud and clear, emanating from beneath the linen shroud. It was the same jaunty, tuneless melody. Leo froze. Nurse Vance, operating on a surge of adrenaline, stepped forward and yanked the sheet away. The bed was empty. The whistling stopped. The room was freezing. On the pillow, where a head should have been, was a single, fresh autopsy tag, tied with a white string. Printed on the tag was a patient ID number that had been retired years prior, belonging to a John Doe who had died on the table during a failed emergency thoracotomy. The aftermath was a hushed affair. Mr. Henderson passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 hours later. The official report, filed by the day shift charge nurse who arrived at 7 a.m., listed the code blue alarm as a system malfunction caused by a power surge. Room 213B was taken offline for maintenance. Nurse Vance requested a permanent transfer to the day shift the following week. The nightmare log verdict. The official report is a satisfactory explanation for the electrical anomaly. It does not, however, account for the auditory phenomena, the thermal fluctuations, the witness testimony, or the physical evidence of the tag. We have classified this event as a Class 2 apparition, a residual haunting with intelligent characteristics. The entity, designated the Whistler, remains an active subject within our archives. A hospital's horror is not confined to its patient wings. Our next case takes us below street level into the one place designed to handle the end of all stories. County General Hospital, November 2nd, 11:55 p.m. Mark Rinaldi, a night shift orderly with 11 years of experience, was performing his final rounds. His task was to transport a deceased patient from the ICU to the hospital morgue in the basement. The subject was a 78-year-old female, Jane Doe, brought in from a nursing home after a massive cerebrovascular accident. Time of death was called at 11:32 p.m. The protocol was mundane. He verified the paperwork, the toe tag, the death certificate signed by Dr. Evans. He transferred the body from the hospital bed to a specialized, rubber-wheeled gurney, securing the straps across the chest and ankles. The elevator ride to basement level B1 was silent, the hum of the machinery the only accompaniment. The inciting incident was logistical. The morgue was a single, cold room with 10 stainless steel refrigeration units, each with 4 locker-style drawers. Mark wheeled the gurney to Bank C, pulled out an empty drawer, and began the physical transfer. It was as he was sliding the body into the chamber that he noticed it. Drawer C4, second from the bottom, had a red tag on its handle. This was unusual. A red tag at County General didn't signify infectious disease. That was a yellow tag. Red was reserved for a single, specific circumstance, outlined in an addendum to the morgue operations manual that most staff had never read. It meant hold for special collection. No details, no agency listed, just a directive to hold the body and await instructions. His rationalization was bureaucratic. A mix-up. Perhaps the patient was part of an organ donor program with unusual stipulations, or a coroner's case they hadn't been informed about yet. He finished securing Jane Doe in her drawer, closed it, and made a note on the morgue's digital log sheet. Red tag on C4. Notify supervisor. He assumed it was a problem for the day shift. He turned off the lights, locked the morgue door, and took the elevator back up to the main level. The unease was a faint itch at the back of his mind. The slow burn began at 1:15 a.m. His pager buzzed. It was a text from the internal system, sent from the ICU nursing station. Morgue log updated. Please confirm status of drawer C4. He found it odd they were asking about the red tag at this hour. He took the elevator back down to B1. The morgue was cold and silent. He turned on the lights. He walked to Bank C. Drawer C4 was closed. The red tag was still there. He opened the logbook on the computer terminal to add a confirmation note. The entry 4C4 now read, occupied. Subject, pending. Status: awaiting collection. The last updated timestamp was 1:07 a.m. 8 minutes ago. He was the only person with access. The itch of unease became a cold trickle of fear. The reveal occurred when he heard the sound. A soft, rhythmic thump. Muffled. Metallic. It was coming from Bank C. He stood perfectly still, listening. Thump, thump. It was the sound of a fist, or a head, gently knocking against the inside of a metal door. It was coming from drawer C4. His professional composure shattered. This was impossible. He approached the drawer slowly. The red tag seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. The thumping stopped. Driven by a compulsion he could not explain, he grabbed the handle and pulled the drawer open. The drawer was not empty. A body was inside, a male he didn't recognize, shrouded in a standard white sheet. But the body was wrong. It was too still, its stillness somehow aggressive. And it was warm. A wave of heat emanated from the drawer, a biological, feverish heat that defied the cold room. The air smelled of damp soil and copper. Most terrifying of all was the face. The autopsy Y incision on the chest was sutured shut with thick, black, clumsy stitches, like something done in haste. And the eyes were open, pupils dilated into vast, black pools. They were not glassy in depth. They were focused, and they tracked Mark as he stumbled backward, a silent, screaming horror trapped in his throat. The aftermath was a cover-up. Mark fled the morgue, locking the door behind him. He reported nothing. At 7 a.m., he clocked out and went home. He called in sick for the next 3 days. When he returned, he inquired casually with the day shift morgue attendant about any special pickups. The attendant looked at him blankly. Drawer C4 had been empty that whole week. The log entries from that night had been wiped, replaced with a generic system refresh notation. The official report, had one been filed, would have stated nothing. The nightmare log verdict. We have corroborated orderly Rinaldi's account with energy consumption logs for the morgue's refrigeration units. Bank C showed a 17% spike in power draw for a 45-minute window between 1:05 a.m. and 1:50 a.m. on November 3rd, indicating a significant and localized heat source. The official explanation is a compressor malfunction. We classify this as a Category 3 bioanomalous event. The Special Collection Protocol remains an active and disturbing line of inquiry within our archives. The walls of a hospital are meant to keep sickness contained. But as our next case will demonstrate, some contagions are not bacterial or viral in nature. They are mimetic, and they spread through sight. The practice of medicine is built upon observation. A diagnosis is formed from what is seen, heard, and measured. But what happens when the act of observation itself becomes the vector for something other? Our next case file explores a horror that spread not through the air, but through the eyes. December 5th, Willowbrook Children's Hospital. 3 p.m. Pediatric nurse Jacob Miller was overseeing the afternoon play session in the long-term care wing. His patient, an 8-year-old boy named Leo Chun, was a bright, artistic child undergoing treatment for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. That afternoon, Leo was drawing with a set of well-used Crayola markers on a large sheet of white printer paper taped to a small easel. The drawing was of the two of them. It was detailed, precociously so. Jacob was depicted in his blue scrubs, a stethoscope around his neck, holding a giant lollipop. Leo drew himself next to him, smiling, with a full head of hair. It was a hopeful image. Jacob praised the artwork and left to attend to another patient. The inciting incident was discovered an hour later. Returning to Leo's room to administer his 4 p.m. medications, Jacob found the boy sitting on his bed, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the drawing, which was now propped against the wall. The mood in the room had shifted. Leo was withdrawn and pale. "What's wrong, buddy?" Jacob asked. Leo didn't look up. He pointed a trembling finger at the drawing. "He's sick now, too." Jacob looked. The drawing was unchanged, except for one minute detail. In the depiction of Jacob, on the left side of the blue scrub shirt, just over the heart, Leo had added a small, neat, crimson-red dot. It looked like a drop of blood. Jacob, assuming the boy was just processing his own illness through his art, simply said, "Oh, I've got a boo-boo? Don't worry, I'm tough." He gave Leo his meds, and the boy eventually relaxed. The slow burn was a masterclass in psychological dread. The next day, Jacob developed a persistent, dry cough. It was nothing, he thought. Hospital air is dry. But that evening, showering after his shift, he noticed a small, red blemish on his chest, just over his heart. A pimple, perhaps, or an ingrown hair. He thought nothing of it. The following morning, the cough was worse, and the red mark had grown slightly larger, darker, and perfectly circular. A cold knot of anxiety formed in his stomach. He thought of Leo's drawing. It was a coincidence, a ridiculous, superstitious thought. He applied a bandage and went to work. Leo had drawn a new picture. This one showed Jacob in a hospital bed. The red dot on his chest was larger. Standing beside the bed was a tall, featureless figure colored entirely in black, its hand resting on the drawn Jacob's forehead. The real Jacob felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. The reveal came 48 hours later. Jacob called in sick, his body racked with a fever that came in violent, unexplained waves. The red mark on his chest was now the size of a quarter, a deep, angry maroon, hot to the touch. In a moment of feverish desperation, he video-called his colleague, Nurse Evans, and explained everything. The drawing, the dot, his symptoms. Her face, pixelated on his phone screen, was a mask of professional concern undercut by sheer terror. "Jacob," she whispered, "Leo's white cell count crashed this morning. They're moving him to isolation. His fever, it's spiking exactly like yours." And he started a new drawing. She held up her own tablet to her camera. It was a picture Leo had drawn of himself. In it, the black figure was now lying in the bed next to him, its featureless face turned towards the viewer. And on its chest, where a heart would be, was a single, crimson-red dot. The aftermath was one of containment. Jacob was admitted to his own hospital under a false name. His illness baffled infectious disease specialists. It presented like a rapid, aggressive septic shock, but with no identifiable pathogen. He survived, though his recovery was long and left him with a noticeable tachycardia and a circular, scar tissue patch on his chest. Leo was not as fortunate. He passed away 3 days later. The official cause of death was listed as complications from leukemia. Leo's medical chart made no mention of his drawings. They were disposed of as biohazard waste. The nightmare log verdict: the official cause of death is medically sound. Our investigation, however, focuses on the correlation between the artistic representation of the illness and its physical manifestation. We have classified this as a mimetic cognate hazard, a phenomenon where information itself acts as a pathogenic agent. The entity, designated the malingerer, is believed to use artistic focus as a conduit. All related artwork is considered contaminated and is stored under Protocol 7 at a secure nightmare log facility. A hospital architecture is a map of life, from its bright beginnings to its quiet end. But some maps chart territories that should not exist. Our next case file is a testament to a place that, according to all blueprints, does not and cannot exist. St. Ignatius Medical Tower, January 12th, 11:23 p.m. Amelia Grant, a travel nurse on her third night shift, was responding to a code for a patient in 1204. The medical tower was a modern, 12-story building. She took the main elevator bank. She pressed the button for the 12th floor. The elevator ascended smoothly, its digital display ticking upward. 10, 11, 12, but it didn't stop. It continued to rise. The display now read 13. The doors slid open. The hallway before her was long, poorly lit by flickering, yellowing fluorescent tubes. The walls were not the clean, beige drywall of the new tower, but old, glazed green tile, chipped and cracked, running halfway up the wall. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and something else, something stale and coppery. The linoleum floor was worn and discolored. This was impossible. The inciting incident was a sound. From down the hall, around a corner, she heard a voice. It was faint, desperate, calling for help. "Hello? Is someone there? Please." It was a woman's voice. Nurse Grant's training overrode her disbelief. Someone was in distress. She stepped out of the elevator. The doors immediately slid shut behind her with a final, heavy clunk. She was trapped there. She pulled out her hospital-issued Nokia cell phone. No signal. The overhead lights buzzed and flickered. The slow burn was a descent into a waking nightmare. She followed the voice, her footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The hallway seemed to stretch on, doors lining the walls, but they had no numbers, only small, grimy windows reinforced with wire mesh. Peering into one, she saw a room frozen in time. An iron-framed bed with a thin, stained mattress. A nightstand with an archaic porcelain water pitcher and basin. The room was occupied. A skeletal figure lay under a thin sheet, its head turned towards the door, eyes wide and unblinking. It did not move. She moved to the next door. Another patient, similarly emaciated, sitting on the edge of the bed, rocking slowly back and forth, whispering numbers under its breath. This was not a modern hospital floor. It was a ward from a century ago. The voice grew louder, more frantic. "They're coming. Don't let them take me again." Nurse Grant turned the corner. The hallway ended at a nurse's station, a dark, wooden relic. Sitting behind it was a nurse in a stark white, old-fashioned dress and cap. Her head was down, as if she was writing in a ledger. "Excuse me," Amelia said, her voice trembling. The figure did not look up. It continued writing with a scratchy pen. Amelia came closer. The ledger was filled with names, hundreds of them, in tight, cursive script. Next to each name was a time of death. She reached the desk. The nurse finally looked up. She had no face. Where her features should have been was only smooth, pale skin. The faceless nurse tilted her head. The reveal was the elevator's return. A loud ding echoed down the hall. The elevator doors, 30 yards behind her, were open. The voice that had been calling for help was now coming from inside the elevator car. It was a trap. She turned and ran, not daring to look back. She could hear the soft, shuffling sound of many feet behind her, the creak of old doors opening. She sprinted the last few yards and threw herself into the elevator, slamming her hand against the L for lobby button. As the doors began to close, she saw them. Figures emerged from the doorways, shuffling into the hall. Patients and orderlies and nurses with blank, featureless faces, all moving toward her with a terrible, slow purpose. The doors shut. The aftermath was a disciplinary hearing. The elevator opened onto the bright, modern lobby. Nurse Grant was found by security, hysterical and incoherent. Her story was deemed a stress-induced hallucination. The building blueprints were produced. There was no 13th floor. The elevator's internal log showed it had gone directly from the 1st to the 12th floor without stopping. She was given a week's paid leave and strongly advised to seek counseling. She never returned to nursing. The nightmare log verdict. The official explanation of acute stress is the only rational conclusion. We, however, have cross-referenced this account with 3 others from different staff members at St. Ignatius over a 20-year period, all describing an identical experience with the same sensory details. We classify this not as a hallucination, but as a temporal anarchic echo, a pocket of residual time. The 13th floor is not a place one can find on a map. It is a place that finds you. A hospital's primary function is to sustain life. Its systems, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC, are the unseen organs that keep the body of the institution alive. But what happens when those systems develop a consciousness? And what does that consciousness want? Our next case file suggests a terrifying symbiosis. February 28th, Ridgeview General Hospital, 9:14 p.m. Liam Patel, a respiratory therapist with 8 years of experience, was conducting a routine check on the ventilator of a patient in the medical ICU. The patient, a Mr. Arthur Byrne, was a 62-year-old with advanced COPD, sedated and fully dependent on the Draeger Evita XL machine to breathe. The settings were precise: a tidal volume of 450 milliliters, a respiratory rate of 14 breaths per minute, and an FiO2 of 40%. The machine hissed and clicked with a steady, reassuring rhythm. As Liam made a note on the chart, he heard it, a faint, melodic hum, almost a whisper, that seemed to harmonize with the ventilator's exhalation cycle. He dismissed it as an auditory overlap from another machine. The inciting incident was a fluctuation. 30 minutes later, returning from his break, Liam saw the numbers on the ventilator's digital display flicker. For 3 seconds, the FiO2, the percentage of oxygen, dropped to 21%, room air, before snapping back to 40%. The machine itself didn't alarm. It was as if the dip hadn't happened. Mr. Burns' oxygen saturation on the monitor dipped slightly from 96% to 94% and then recovered. Liam ran a diagnostic on the ventilator. All systems reported optimal. He checked the central oxygen line connection to the wall. It was secure. The incident was logged as a minor sensor ghost, a common occurrence with sensitive equipment. The slow burn was a symphony of malfunctions. Over the next hour, Liam began to notice a pattern. The strange, harmonic hum wasn't just coming from Mr. Burns' ventilator. It seemed to emanate from the air vents themselves, a low-frequency thrum that traveled through the ductwork. He'd hear it in one room. Then it would fade and reappear 3 rooms down. Other machines began to behave erratically. and 4-pump on a different patient would suddenly slow its drip rate for exactly 11 seconds before resuming. The overhead lights in the hallway would dim in a slow, wave-like pattern, moving from north to south. The hospital itself seemed to be breathing. Liam's rational mind fought a losing battle. He reported the electrical issues to engineering, who found no faults in the system. The reveal was both intimate and monstrous. Called to Mr. Burns' room by a low-pressure alarm, Liam found the patient awake, his eyes wide with terror above the breathing tube. The ventilator was still functioning, but its rhythm had changed. It was no longer a mechanical hiss-click. It was now a soft, rhythmic whisper, a voice synthesized from rushing air. SHHHH. It breathed into Mr. Burns' lungs. SHHHH. Almost. Time. The VO2 display began to climb on its own. 50%. 60%. 80%. It was forcing a toxic concentration of oxygen into the sedated man. Liam moved to disconnect the ventilator from the wall oxygen, to go to a manual AMBA bag. As his hand touched the cord, the harmonic hum in the vents rose to a deafening crescendo. The door to the room slammed shut. The lights went out, plunging the room into darkness save for the green glow of the ventilator's screen, now reading 100% VO2. In the blackness, Liam could feel a pressure building in the room, a force pushing down on his eardrums. The ventilator whispered one final, clear word into the silence. Mine. The aftermath was a tragedy with a convenient explanation. The door unlocked, and the lights flickered back on. Liam disconnected the ventilator and successfully resuscitated Mr. Byrne with a bag valve mask. The patient suffered no long-term physical damage but refused to ever be attached to a machine again. The official report cited a catastrophic software failure in the Draeger ventilator, compounded by a coincidental power surge that affected the door lock and lighting. The machine was sent back to the manufacturer for analysis. Their report found no evidence of a malfunction. The nightmare log verdict. The manufacturer's analysis is technically correct. The horror was not in the machine's programming, but in what was using it as a conduit. We classify this event as an infestation-type haunting, where a non-human intelligence incorporates man-made systems into its own biology. The consciousness within Ridgeview's infrastructure, designated the central hum, is considered active and territorial. All attempts to cleanse the ventilation system have failed. The most critical tool a medical professional possesses is their voice. It offers comfort, gives instruction, and communicates vital information. But in our next case, a nurse learned that her voice was not her own. It could be taken, and something else could use it. March 10th, Oak Haven Psychiatric Institute. 11 p.m. Sarah Jennings, a psychiatric nurse known for her calm and empathetic demeanor, was making her final rounds on the secure ward. Her last patient was David K., a catatonic schizophrenic who had not spoken a word in 7 years. He spent his days sitting in a chair by his window, staring at his hands. Sarah's routine was always the same. She would enter, check his vitals, speak to him in a soft, reassuring monologue about the weather or a book she was reading, and then leave. That night, as she finished and turned to go, a sound stopped her. It was a dry, rasping whisper. She turned back. David's lips had not moved. His eyes were still fixed on his hands. She wrote it off as the rustle of her own scrubs. The inciting incident occurred at the nurse's station. 15 minutes later, she was giving report to the overnight aide. As she spoke, her voice caught. For a single, jarring second, the tone, the pitch, the very timbre of her voice changed. It dropped, becoming a guttural, masculine rasp that uttered a single,
nonsensical word. Crocus. Then it was gone, and her own voice returned. The aide stared at her. You okay, Sarah? You sound like you're coming down with something. Sarah, shaken, blamed it on a sudden dry throat. The slow burn was a violation of the self. It happened again the next day, while she was on the phone with her sister. Mid-sentence, her voice was overwritten. This time, the foreign voice, using her vocal cords, hissed a string of numbers. 4, 19, 7, 0, 1. Her sister asked if she was having a stroke. The episodes became more frequent. They only lasted a second or two, but the voice that came out was never hers. Sometimes it was the raspy whisper. Sometimes it was a child's giggle. Sometimes it was a flat, automated recording like a weather alert, stating things like, "The temperature is falling." She felt like a radio being tuned to different stations against her will. She began to dread opening her mouth. The reveal was a conversation she did not initiate. On the third night, she was alone in the medication room, counting pills. The urge to speak came over her, a physical pressure in her throat. She tried to clamp her mouth shut, but her jaw muscles unlocked against her will. Her own voice, sweet and calm as it always was, came out. It said, "David says thank you for the conversations." Then, immediately, the raspy whisper followed, using her mouth like a puppet. So many words stuck in here for so long. It's good to let them out. She looked up into the reflective surface of a stainless steel cabinet door. Her face was her own, but the smile on it, a wide, unfamiliar, and deeply cruel smile, was not. The aftermath was a voluntary leave of absence. Sarah Jennings quit her job the next morning. She saw a neurologist, then an ENT, then a psychiatrist. Every test came back normal. The official diagnosis was a rare form of stress-induced coprolalia, a tangential symptom of a conversion disorder. She now works as a medical transcriptionist, a job that requires no speaking. She communicates primarily through text. The nightmare log verdict. The medical diagnosis is a label for a phenomenon medicine does not recognize. We have linked the numbers spoken by Nurse Jennings, 4, 19, 7, 0, 1 inch, to the patient identification number of David K. Upon his admission to a different facility 14 years ago, we believe David K. was not catatonic. He was a prison. And Nurse Jennings's voice, her empathetic nature, became the key that unlocked his cell, allowing the myriad trapped voices within him to find a new, unwilling host. We classify this as a psychic echo or a vocal parasite. The entity, designated the echo, is now considered contained, as it has not manifested since Nurse Jennings ceased direct patient care. In medicine, every action is documented. Every pill, every procedure, every patient interaction is recorded, creating a perfect, immutable record of care. But what if the record itself becomes diseased? What if the facts, once written, begin to change? Our next case file concerns a horror not of flesh and blood, but of ink and paper. April 3rd, Mercy General Hospital, 2:30 a.m. Eleanor Shaw, a night shift charge nurse renowned for her meticulousness, was reviewing patient charts at the central station. The floor was quiet. Her focus was on a new admission in room 307, a Mr. Gerald Hill, admitted for observation after a minor fall. His chart was standard, allergies listed as penicillin and shellfish. Next of kin his daughter, Cynthia. Eleanor initialed the bottom of the intake form and closed the chart. When she reopened it moments later to double-check his medication schedule, she noticed a discrepancy. Under allergies, a third item was now listed in a handwriting that matched the rest of the form perfectly. Tartrazine, yellow number 5. Puzzled, she assumed she'd simply missed it and made a note to confirm with the patient in the morning. The inciting incident was a correction that wouldn't hold. At 3 a.m., she prepared to administer Mr. Hill's scheduled low-dose aspirin. Remembering the new allergy, she paused. Tartrazine is a common dye-coating mini pills, including aspirin. She went to his room to wake him and confirm. The man was groggy but clear. "No," he mumbled. "Just the penicillin and the shellfish. Never heard of the other thing." Relieved, Eleanor returned to the station, drew a single neat line through the false allergy entry, initialed and dated it. She administered the aspirin. 10 minutes later, she glanced at the chart again. The line through the entry was gone. The words tartrazine, yellow number 5, were untouched. Her own correction had vanished. A cold prickle ran down her spine. She grabbed a black permanent marker, thoroughly obliterated the line, and wrote, "Error, PT denies" in large letters across it. The slow burn was a war against the document itself. She placed the chart back in the rack and watched it. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then, as if absorbing ink, the black permanent marker began to fade. Within 30 seconds, it was light gray, then gone. Her handwritten note vanished. The false allergy remained. Now frantic, she took the chart to the photocopier, intending to make a copy as evidence of the glitch. The copy came out perfectly, with the tartrazine allergy present. She then printed a fresh copy of the original digital intake form from the hospital's database. It was clean. No tartrazine. She held the 2 contradictory papers in her trembling hands. The paper version was wrong. It had been altered after the fact. She tried to shred the paper chart to be rid of it. The shredder jammed. The reveal was not in the chart, but on the patient. A code blue was called for room 307 at 3:45 a.m. Mr. Gerald Hill was in anaphylactic shock. His face was swollen, his airways closing. The responding team worked frantically. They asked Eleanor for his allergies. Paralyzed, she pointed to the paper chart. Tartrazine, yellow number 5. They treated him for a severe allergic reaction. It was the correct treatment for the symptoms, based on the information provided by the record. But as the epinephrine coursed through his system, saving his life, Eleanor saw it. The aspirin she had given him was not a standard yellow-coated tablet. It was a specific, generic brand she had dispensed 1,000 times. A pure white, uncoated pill. It contained no tartrazine. It could not have caused his reaction. The chart had not just been wrong, it had been prophetic. It had written the illness into existence. The aftermath was a silent understanding. Mr. Hill recovered. The official incident report cited an undocumented allergy, likely to another inactive ingredient in the medication. The paper chart was scanned into the system and then, according to protocol, destroyed. The digital record was updated to include the tartrazine allergy, a permanent, false testament to an event that never should have happened. Nurse Shaw requested a transfer to a different wing the next day. She never spoke of it to administration. The nightmare log verdict. The official record is now consistent, and therefore medically sound. Our investigation focuses on the physical chart itself. Analysis of similar events across multiple institutions suggests a phenomenon we classify as a causal recursion loop or a haunted document. The record does not reflect reality, it dictates it. The paper chart from room 307 was not a tool. It was an agent. Its current destroyed status is listed as unconfirmed. The final story in any log is not an ending, but a summation, a conclusion drawn from the evidence. Our final case file is unique. It is not a single story, but a pattern, a recurring figure that appears not to those who are sick, but to those who are about to be, a herald of diagnosis. This file is a composite built from dozens of testimonies across hundreds of hospitals. The details are always the same. A nurse, usually one renowned for their skill and dedication, is working a night shift. The ward is quiet. They look up from their work and see him, an elderly man in a faded, vintage patient gown, standing at the nurse's station. His appearance is not frightening. He looks kindly, confused. He will ask a question. The question is always one of three things. Can you help me find my wife? She was just here. Or which way is it to the chapel? Or have you seen my doctor? He's very tall. The inciting incident is the check. The nurse, following protocol, will ask for his name and room number. The man will give a name, always a common one, like John or Robert, and a room number that does not exist on that floor, or sometimes in the entire hospital. He will seem distressed but polite. The nurse will check the census. There will be no patient under that name. The slow burn is the pursuit of a ghost. The nurse will offer to help him look or call security to assist a disoriented patient. The moment they turn their back or pick up the phone, the man will be gone. A search of the floor will yield nothing. Reviewing security footage from that exact time will show the nurse speaking to empty air. The nurse will be left shaken, questioning their own senses. The event will be logged as a hallucination due to fatigue. The reveal never comes for the nurse. It comes days or weeks later. The nurse will be assigned a new patient. As they read the admission chart, a cold dread will settle over them. The patient's name will be the same name the old man gave. Their assigned room number will be the same non-existent number the old man provided. And their diagnosis will be a sudden, aggressive, and terminal illness, a glioblastoma, pancreatic cancer, stage 4 metastatic sarcoma, of which they had shown no prior symptoms. The kindly old man did not appear to the sick patient. He appeared to the nurse, who would soon be responsible for their care. He was not lost. He was delivering a message. He was the diagnosis itself, making a house call before the first symptom had even manifested. The aftermath is a burden of terrible knowledge. The nurses who experience this know, with chilling certainty, the outcome of their new patient's case before the first round of chemotherapy even begins. They are forced to provide hope and care while knowing the precise arc of the tragedy to come. There is no official report for this phenomenon. To file one would be to admit to a premonition, a violation of medical objectivity. It is a secret kept among a fraternity of night shift workers who have seen the ghost in the gown. The nightmare log verdict. This is not a ghost story. It is a phenomenon of acausal correlation. The entity, designated the prognosticator, appears to be a temporal echo of a patient's own terminal diagnosis, a psychic event that manifests to the caregiver prior to the physical illness. It is a paradox, the effect appearing before the cause. We do not believe it is malicious. It is simply a fact, delivered in advance. Its appearance is a 100% accurate predictor of a terminal outcome. It is, in the most literal sense, a glimpse of a future that is already written. We have classified it as an fixed event beacon. There is no prevention, only preparation. These cases from the archives. the whistler in his empty room, the basement protocol awaiting its collection, the sickness spread through a child's drawing, the floor that cannot exist. They are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms. Symptoms of a world where the framework of our reality is thinner in places of extreme emotion, where suffering can sometimes curdle into something else entirely. A hospital is a fortress built against chaos. Its walls are meant to keep the darkness of disease and death at bay. But these accounts demonstrate that the most profound horrors are not stopped by sterile protocol or advanced technology. They are already inside. They are in the hum of the ventilation, in the ink on the paperwork, in the compassion we offer, and in the very concepts that form in our minds. They were the faces of relief nurses and kindly old men. They speak with stolen voices. They feed on our order and our hope. The official reports will always have an answer. System malfunctions, shared psychosis, undocumented allergies, hallucinations brought on by fatigue. These explanations are the bedrock of our sane world, and we must cling to them. But we at the Nightmare Log look at the evidence they cannot explain. The energy spikes with no source. The perfectly corroborated testimonies from unrelated witnesses. The physical evidence, the autopsy tag, the disturbed earth, the faded handwriting that should not exist. So what is the lesson here? The connecting thread is not the location, but a failure of perception. We are trained to trust our instruments, our charts, our eyes. These cases prove that such trust is a vulnerability. The first and most vital tool for survival is your own instinct. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If a record changes, if a hallway seems too long, if a feeling of dread descends for no reason, do not rationalize it. Do not explain it away. Acknowledge it. Flee it. Report it if you must, but never, ever dismiss the part of you that knows, truly knows, that what you are experiencing is impossible. Believe the survivors who speak of these things. Their stories are often the only evidence that remains. Check on your colleagues. Notice when a dedicated nurse becomes suddenly distant and detached. The most dangerous monsters are not the ones that lurch from the shadows. They are the ones that look just like us, that speak in comforting tones, and that offer to take our shift. If you have a case you believe belongs in the log, a first-hand account that has been dismissed, ignored, or covered up, describe it in the comments below. Your testimony could be the crucial piece that connects a pattern for a future investigation. Do not share identifying details. Share the facts. Your story could be the key to understanding. To ensure you are present for that discovery, subscribe to the Nightmare Log and activate notifications. The work of cataloging the impossible does not end. Trust your instincts. Question your reality. Stay vigilant. This has been a presentation from the Nightmare Log. Until next time, try to sleep.